Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Here we go. Big Friday show this week as we prep for this coming weekend's AEW Revolution pay-per-view. Today on the podcast, we will be talking AEW's Go Home Dynamite edition, as well as continuing along in our retro review series of classic content. For those of you watching for the first time, welcome to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble for wrestling recaps and discussions. If you have not done so already, please subscribe, leave a comment, like the show for me, and come back and check out the show each week on either platform to show your support. And again, it's a packed show for today, so I want to get going here on the Dynamite Report. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk the show from Wednesday first, and after we get through that report, I'm going to do a rundown of the Revolution card, and then I'll give you a brief overview / predictions outline for what I expect this coming weekend. So this is the March 2nd edition of AEW Dynamite, and they had prepped a big announcement for the show from Tony Khan. Actually, the circulating rumors regarding the Tony Khan big announcement have been going on for several days now. And they launched right into it from the onset of the program here with Tony and Tony in the ring. Turns out the big announcement is that as of March 2nd, 2022, Tony Khan is now the sole proprietor of Ring of Honor Wrestling, and that he now owns the rights to company assets, their tape library, and all other intellectual property, I presume. I guess discounting contracts, since I believe ROH had released everyone from their contracts right before they went dark late last year. And if you can get past the awkwardness of watching Tony Khan on camera and the fact that he was extremely anxious and looked very uncomfortable trying to broadcast this to the public, this is a pretty big announcement. And truthfully, one that I don't think was as shocking or as monumental as a lot of the wrestling media outlets are making it out to be. In fact, I'm pretty sure I had floated this idea around as a huge possibility when I did my Final Battle review in December. And you know, when you factor in AEW's close ties with ROH and where a lot of the current AEW contracted talent stems from, makes a lot of sense. But, okay, here's my problem with the way this whole segment went down, because when it was over, I felt like I had more open-ended questions than I had answers. Okay. So Tony Khan is now the sole owner of Ring of Honor Wrestling. So what does that really mean for AEW? Like, how does that benefit their company? Well, I'm not sure, because Tony never explained any of the details beyond the fact that he bought Ring of Honor. But that doesn't really answer how this ties into benefiting AEW's company long term. And it also doesn't answer what Tony plans to actually do with Ring of Honor. Like, it's cool that he has access to the tape library, but like I mentioned earlier, it's not like Ring of Honor was doing the guaranteed contract deal like WCW did back in the day, where, you know, Tony had the possibility of bringing in exclusively signed ROH talents onto AEW programming and signing them to AEW deals. Like I said, I believe the way the story had went down is that following the Final Battle pay-per-view, everyone that was currently signed to an ROH deal had become a free agent after that show. Okay, and if the plan is to give ROH its own show to maybe replace the Dark or the Dark Elevation programming on YouTube, that might be an option. But honestly, at this point, they'd probably be smart to just have it replace Rampage on Fridays, what with how redundant and pointless that show's become now. But, like, what's Tony going to do with it? Is he going to run it as its own independent promotion? Is he going to try and sync it with AEW's programming in some capacity? Maybe try to fit it into the format? Or is it just going to become a brand identity that Tony can link AEW to, and that's all that really comes out of it? I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind here, too, that Ring of Honor was already a company on life support well before they went dark. I mean, I think you could argue shit really hit the fan for them once they lost Cody and the Young Bucks. Because at that point, ROH pretty much lost the only thing that was carrying their brand as a viable wrestling company. That being something resembling name power. Of course, by the time everyone either jumped ship to New Japan or NXT in that mid to late 2010 era of wrestling, like, people were on the internet making the whole mockery of the fact that NXT ended up becoming the ROH replacement when it came to ring work and talent acquisition. So it'll be interesting to see what Tony does with this. Again, the execution of the announcement was cool, but I don't know. It's not like it was a real earth-shattering news bulletin that's going to change the landscape of the business in any way. I think Tony could have done a better job explaining what it all means, but, looking back at him actually trying to deliver this announcement on TV, maybe keeping it short and sweet was a wise choice. But that led directly into Bryan Danielson versus Christopher Daniels, which Tony had previously discussed the fact that these two were the guys to main event ROH's first pay-per-view, and 20 years later, they were going to do a return match. Yes, a 20-year unsettled rivalry rematch for free on TV with no build. It really is like watching WCW all over again. And this was a good match that probably would have been great to fantastic if they'd have built it up for 3 or 4 weeks. Daniels is still great at 51 years old. Still able to hit every old trick in the book flawlessly. Probably the last of a dying breed of talents that'll still be doing this well into their 50s because, well, everybody in the business now under the age of 30 is either killing themselves with pointless dives or doing reckless bumps in their matches. God, I still can't believe Daniels' eye injury still hasn't properly healed. When did he get that injury? Wasn't it from the match he worked with the Bucks last summer? I think he did an interview with Chris Van Vliet talking about how he'd gone to see a doctor about it, and like the prognosis was, maybe it'll heal right, maybe it won't, can't really tell. And he's being a good sport about it. I almost kind of wish this would have been the pay-per-view match instead of Danielson having to wrestle Jon Moxley. Especially after seeing that post-match promo with Danielson and Mox. And like I said, I am planning to do a card rundown at the end, so I won't give away too much here in terms of predictions, but I mean, isn't it kind of a foregone conclusion that Mox is going over at the pay-per-view? The dude just came back from rehab. It's his first real big match back, and while I'm not thrilled at the idea that it has to come at the expense of Danielson, I mean, it is a pretty obvious finish. Again, I don't know what it all leads to after the fact, but I don't know, dude. I never really liked the idea of them doing this program to begin with, and if the whole thing is just leading to both guys teaming up afterwards anyway, or Mox turning heel after the fact, why? Why do Danielson and Mox need to team up on this show? Didn't we already try this experiment with Mox and Eddie Kingston? We all saw how pointless that whole thing was. Again, I don't know if they would be doing like an actual tag team per se, or whether they would just jump on that whole bandwagon of trying to regroup a bunch of new guys in and train them or something like that. And again, I'll get more into it at the predictions part at the end, but yeah, this whole story just really hasn't clicked with me from the jump. Oh, and by the way, thanks for coming, Daniels. First match back in 7 months, and not only you jobbed out on a TV match, but then you get laid out afterwards, getting your head stomped in on the mat, and then you disappear afterwards, never to be seen on the show again. What a geek that guy was. Match was good while it lasted, though. Unfortunately, we had the Casino Tag Team Battle Royal Gauntlet cluster next. And I already did my whole spiel last week about my lack of care for battle royals in wrestling, and I mean, I've got to figure that a lot of fans share that same opinion, even the diehard AEW fans out there. They're just generally boring matches where not a whole lot happens, and you know, especially when you start piling guys in the ring there, it ends up just becoming a total clusterfuck. It didn't start off bad, you know, kicking things off with FTR going up against the returning Top Flight duo. So, good to see Dante Martin has some backup now instead of flailing around with 4 or 5 friends on TV who just kind of appear and disappear at random. And I haven't seen much from Top Flight as a team. I know Darius was out with an injury for the better part of 2021, so I would like to see more of them before I draw any kind of conclusion about them. They did a lot of flips here, so they're already not off on a good footing in my book. Had the Acclaimed coming in third. Keep in mind, I just saw Anthony Bowens do a clean job to the company mascot less than a week ago, but as is the case with most guys in AEW, everyone gets rewarded for TV losses by gaining championship opportunities. Job order geeks coming in fourth. Already at this point, the ring was just filled with dweebs, and we weren't even halfway into it. Well, mostly dweebs, with FTR just kind of hanging in the periphery. Butcher and Blade were out fifth. Still kind of waiting for AEW to actually do something of value with those guys. God, remember when they debuted and laid out Cody? We all thought they were going to be this monstrous tag duo that would just smash through guys. Oh, yeah, the Varsity Blondes out there. Of course, I should mention that nobody knows how to book a fucking gauntlet match anymore in wrestling. Everyone just files into the ring and immediately either gets laid out with a move or they just start doing fake-looking brawling with the other guys, and no one ever gets a chance to actually showcase an offensive flurry of any kind. I think Bear Country came out during the break. Santana and Ortiz were out there. Of course, I knew it was only a matter of time before we'd get Chuckle Fuck Taylor and Trent Beretta out there with Orange Cassidy and the Peanut Gallery. And by the way, I just want to throw this out there now. Anyone at this point that is going to try and sit there and defend Danhausen, just go fuck yourself. Please. More Dark Order geeks in there. Those guys really overstayed their welcome on this show this week. And of course, the Partridge in the Pear Tree with the arrival of the Beta Bucks, who of course get pyro shot off when they come down because why the fuck not? At this point, I completely lost track of who was in this match. Again, it's a muddled mess of bodies. Every team in there, discount FTR, or just undercard dorks or job guys. And it's completely pointless to even take notes about anything that goes on in these matches, much less impossible to even keep track of anything that's going on. It's all just a formality until it gets down to the final 2 or 3 teams where things really actually start to matter. And the final 3 in this were Top Flight, FTR, and the Beta Bucks. And again, I should point out, remember when Santana and Ortiz beat Chris Jericho in a tag match and we all thought they were going to matter again? Yeah. Dante ended up taking out Cash Wheeler and himself. Matt Jackson and Dax Harwood had a back-and-forth exchange. Dax ended up on the apron so Red Dragon could sneak down and kick him off the apron. So I believe that is the second occasion now where Red Dragon have fucked FTR in 2 weeks. One would think that's actually leading to something of value, but knowing AEW and the way they book, it probably won't lead to a goddamn thing. Darius ended up eliminating Nick Jackson when they tried to go for the Meltzer driver. Boiled down to Darius and Matt. And I'll admit to this, people really pop at the idea of Darius eliminating the Beta Bucks and winning the match for Top Flight. Probably would have been the wiser choice to go with since, I don't know, it's Darius' first match back in months. Maybe be a good idea to give him a win, but no, of course with AEW, they have no idea what they're doing. So Matt Jackson eliminates him like a geek and Beta Bucks win. Because we all have to continue watching the high school drama acting with the Undisputed Era and the Elite that no one gives a flying shit about, with the exception of the AEW loyalists and basement dwellers. And again, I'll give my predictions on that three-way at the end, but God, this segment dragged like a motherfucker. Thank God they had CM Punk and MJF out next, because I really needed a shot or something after that awful gauntlet match. And of course, Punk's first topic was on the exact thing that we're all thinking about the week after that great MJF promo where he essentially spilled the beans as to why he's the prick douchebag that he is. And Punk's biggest qualm is that even though he doesn't doubt for a second that what MJF said about him was true, he can't help but flick off that warning bell in his head that's saying maybe he's being worked. Wondering whether or not MJF is really sincere about what he said or if he's being gaslit. And while he's questioning himself, wondering whether or not Punk's the bad guy in the whole equation, Punk is also questioning MJF's motives in the whole thing. He starts thinking back to all the horrible shit he's done in AEW, laying out Dean Malenko on television, disparaging Brian Pillman Jr. and his father in his hometown. And even while he's questioning all this, he's really finding it hard to even care at this point who the good guy is or who the bad guy is in the whole equation. So he calls Max out to the ring for a chat, because we all know how that was going to go. Tells MJF of all the horrible, underhanded stuff that Punk's been responsible for throughout his career, pouring alcohol down Jericho's throat, dumping Paul Bear's ashes on The Undertaker, poking fun at Jeff Hardy for substance abuse problems, which is a real damning TV moment considering the whole Jeff Hardy saga in the last month or so. But Punk tells MJF that he doesn't know if he's the good guy, but he is sure trying to be. And he goes for the handshake. MJF thinks twice about it, and he goes in for the hug. And as soon as he wrapped his arms around Punk, I was sitting there going, do it. Do it. You know you want to, Max. Don't hold back. Don't withdraw now. Don't turn babyface on me now, boy. And a la Cody Rhodes, MJF lets go from the hug. He rears back, and he cock blocks Punk right in the gonads. He kicked his balls right out from under his balls. And of course, MJF rips off the jacket he's wearing. He's got the white t-shirt on the front there with the photo of him and Punk from 11 years ago. And out come the Pinnacle for the beatdown. Sean Spears carrying out the dog collar chain. MJF ends up cutting open Punk with the diamond ring. Punk's bleeding like a dripping faucet. They tie Punk over the ropes with the collar. Max wipes the blood from Punk's face onto his shirt to cover Punk in the frame. And he grabs the mic, calls Punk a stupid old man, says that he's a snake, and he promises to end Punk at the pay-per-view. And of course, they all go in for the kill shot, but Sting, Darby, and Sammy run out for the big save, which, makes perfect sense given their history of teaming on the show. And when it was over, the only thing I could think was, God damn it, that should have been the main event angle. And I'll say this, again, I'll get into more detail about it when I run down the card, but everything about this MJF Punk feud, it's real professional wrestling, man. This is authentic, grassroots, brick and mortar, old school, Mid-South pro wrestling done right. And, at this stage, with how perfectly everything's been executed from start to finish in this program, I don't even know how you can argue that this isn't AEW's best program they've ever done. I know that'll piss off all you elite clique members out there and all you Kenny Omega nut huggers, but for all that garbage people kept trying to pump up with Hangman Page and Kenny Omega as the best built AEW feud in company history, what the fuck are you still smoking? Whatever it is, give me a hit on that, because I don't buy that for a second. There's nothing even remotely close to touching how well done this MJF Punk feud has been done. And looking back in the time machine, I can't think of a single thing that I would have changed about anything they did in this feud in terms of material or promos or angles. And maybe cutting back a little bit on time devoted to promos, but beyond that, nah, dude. This is the single best storyline and feud they've ever done. There's real heat here. We all have been given a reason to care about why they're feuding. They didn't pointlessly muddy up the story by adding 16 job order dorks and goofy comedy bullshit with Ghostbuster outfits and Stay Puft Marshmallow outfits. It's a real blood feud with a real identifiable story, with real villains and real protagonists, and a real reason to care about who wins and who loses. It's not that fucking hard, yet for some reason AEW can only seem to get it right 10% of the time. It sure as fuck was better than this women's tag match with Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter versus Thunder Rosa and Mercedes Martinez. That sucks because I actually consider 3 of the 4 girls in this match moderately decent workers. No, I mean, Jamie's not bad, to be fair. But, yeah, I really wasn't feeling this. Now, to be reasonable, it may have just been the fact that they tried to follow this with that Punk MJF segment, and, I mean, nothing was going to come close to following that. Rosa and Baker had a really bad exchange toward the end there, too. I don't know what the hell was going on there, but Britt looked totally out to lunch by the time that finish came around. I don't know if she got knocked loopy, if she just got lost in what the next sequence was, but whatever happened, Britt looked horrible in this match, especially by the end. And the finish was absolutely baffling to me. Like, unless they're actually planning to have Britt retain the belt at the pay-per-view, which at this point I have no idea why they're even bothering, why would you put the babyface challenger over clean here? And if they really are going to have Britt retain, who the fuck is she going to feud with? Thunder Rosa is one of their last stops in terms of top credible challengers at this point. Unless they just sign Becky Lynch or Ronda Rousey out from underneath WWE's nose. Like, who else is there for Britt to feud with at this point? Like, at least if Rosa was going to win here, why not have her pin Jamie Hayter? Wasn't that kind of the point of putting her in the match to begin with? To take the fall? This whole segment didn't make any sense to me. And there was some other girl segments wedged in here that I really didn't write a whole lot down about, so I'll just skip ahead. The Wardlow squash was short and sweet. Christ, I forgot how tall Cesar Bononi was. And I'll admit here, when Spears went to hit Bononi with the chair, but Wardlow grabbed it from behind and he and Spears did that little face-off where Spears looked like he damn near crapped his pants, I laughed at that. I don't know what it is, man, but ever since they made Shawn the lackey for the Pinnacle, he's been a more tolerable character to watch on TV. Probably because they're finally booking him like he should have been booked from the beginning and not trying to force him into being an upper card semi-main event level talent. And speaking of things I really enjoyed, that follow-up pre-tape with Wardlow and Mgf doing the exchange in the back, MJF let Wardlow know that if he wins the ladder match, he'll give him the common courtesy of letting him keep the TNT title because, it's not like he was going to win it anyway. Of course, as he walks off, Wardlow snaps back and says it won't happen when he's always bailing out MJF and helping him win his damn matches. And dude, when MJF came in there and slapped Wardlow in the face and started making threats, bro, that was sick. This slow burn Batista Triple H split is being done very well. The people are clamoring for it, and if Wardlow does end up winning that ladder match at the pay-per-view, which I'm sure he probably will, it'll really kick off things into a new gear going forward for the rest of the year. So that was all well done. But I guess we got to talk about this main event of the Undisputed Era versus Hangman Page and Job Order Dork 3 and 4, a.k.a. Johnny Hungy and the other guy who he usually teams with, whose name I can never remember. Match actually wasn't that bad. It was actually good when Fish, Cole, and O'Reilly were in control, and we actually got to see a modicum of actual tag team wrestling in AEW. Also just makes me that much more infuriated that they've completely wasted Red Dragon on the show for the last 4 months when they probably should have been working consistent TV matches every goddamn week, but what do I know? I'm not Booker of the Year or anything like that. The fake windmill punches at the end from all 6 guys pissed me off, but, aside from that, there was nothing noticeably bad about it. The main story, though, of Cole ducking and dodging Page throughout the whole match, I don't know. I look at it this way. The chicken shit heel dynamic is usually a safe haven in wrestling, but in order to pull it off, you at least have to have a shred of credibility in that program you're doing to make it work. Everything about the Page Cole title program feels, well, to coin a phrase from Sir Maxwell Jacob Friedman himself, mid. It's a lackluster world title program, and it's been that way from the onset because Cole's been booked like such a dork since he showed up in AEW, and Page has been a poorly booked world champion outside the 2 matches he had with Danielson. And the whole idea of Cole running away from Page and trying to avoid him throughout the match, all it's doing is dragging Cole down even more when, quite frankly, Cole needs to be looking as dominant and credible as possible right now. So I wasn't a big fan of that whole deal. The heels winning and tying up Page on the ropes with the duct tape afterwards, okay, fine. It's standard booking 101 for go-home shows, getting the heat at the end of the show to build anticipation for the pay-per-view. I would have probably preferred they'd have closed with the Punk MJF heat angle instead of this one, because the Page Cole heat angle felt lukewarm by comparison. But like I said, man, this world title feud just isn't working for me, which is probably good that it'll be a one and done after the pay-per-view, and then both guys will move on after the fact. Which is simultaneously a shame, considering that in an ideal world where the show is being booked by competent people that know what they're doing, Hangman Page versus Adam Cole should be a bigger deal than how it's built up to be on TV. That sucks. But let me do a quick card rundown before we move on, because I did this after the Full Gear, or before the Full Gear recap last year, and I thought it'd be a little fun projection experiment. So for this show, we have, as of March 4th, as I look at the wiki page, 11 matches booked for the show, 2 of which are scheduled for the buy-in pre-show. Hook versus QT Marshall and Layla Hirsch versus Chris Statlander. And that sucks they're doing Hook and Marshall in the buy-in, because I'd actually kind of like to see that on the main card, especially if they end up doing the 30-second squash like they probably should. Hook going over there is pretty obvious, but I'm more so hoping for the quick squash more than anything. Hirsch and Statlander I could give a fuck less about. Jade Cargill and Ty Conti for the TBS title should probably be the second pre-show match because I have no faith that's going to be any good. Jade will retain, and the match will probably be lousy because Jade Cargill's matches are lousy because she's green and not ready for TV. But they've decided to run with her as a TBS champion, so now they got to make the most of it. So here we are. The six-man tag with Matt Hardy, Andrade, and Isaiah Cassidy versus Sting, Darby, and Sammy Guevara, that's another match that confuses the fuck out of me. Okay, so let me get this straight. On Rampage, it's Andrade versus Sammy versus Darby in a three-way for the TNT title, but the pay-per-view match is a six-man with nothing on the line. I have no idea what to make of that. Unless they're planning on debuting Jeff Hardy or something, like that's really the only reason I can think of why they're even booking this match to be happening on the pay-per-view to begin with. Like the babyface team going over makes the most sense, but again, like it's another feud that I really don't have a vested interest in. The AHO or the AHFO faction is a complete waste of time. The Andrade Darby Sting feud is blech. And like I said, unless it all leads to some kind of Hardy Boys reunion, I mean, I really don't see it going anywhere other than that. So, my projection is the babyface team wins and maybe Matt Hardy and Andrade split off and we see Jeff show up soon, be it at the pay-per-view or sometime on television in the coming weeks. The Jurassic Express Beta Bucks Red Dragon three-way for the tag belts. Yeah, that'll probably be the designated Spotfest match. A, because the Bucks are involved and it's the only style they know how to work. And B, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus usually end up getting tied in with all the gymnastic trampoline stuff. So, my guess is that match will be heavily dependent on how well Fish and O'Reilly can carry it. My problem, moreover, is the fact that this is a textbook example of a WWE multi-man feud where the match revolves around everything except for the belts and the champions. Like, most of the story will probably be focused around the Bucks and Red Dragon story, and the champs will kind of just be pissing in the background waiting to get the win in the end. All the while, when it's over, it's all about the Bucks and their goofy bullshit instead of being about the champions who, let's be candid, are not what you would necessarily call well-booked champions themselves. You know, they've certainly been more effective than the Lucha Fucks, considering we actually see them on television more than twice a month. But, like, aside from beating a couple undercard geek tag teams, the Jurassic Express are coming off just like, I don't know, two guys that happen to have possession of the tag belts, but they certainly don't feel like top champions. So, get ready for some WWE finish garbage with that one. Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson, I've already kind of said my piece on that earlier. Again, it really just feels like a formality at this point that Moxley slated to win. And whether that leads to him teaming up with Danielson afterwards or both guys splitting off and going in their own directions, I mean, I have no investment either way. I think it'll be interesting in terms of what they actually do in the match. Danielson's a great worker, but like his style is nothing close to Moxley. So I am actually curious to see how he adapts to that environment. It doesn't appear that they're doing any kind of street fight false count anywhere garbage, which either means that Mox will try and play it straight for a change and let Danielson carry it, or he'll do some sloppy looking wrestling and Danielson will be dragged down by association. Flip a coin and see what we get. I mean, I have high enough hopes that Danielson will lay out a competently booked wrestling match. You know, maybe force Mox to actually work more of his style, but like I said, at this stage with AEW, I probably should just expect nothing and lower my expectations as far as I can. Chris Jericho and Eddie Kingston is another program that really hasn't done it for me. The promo stuff last week was pretty good from both guys, but Kingston just feels so cold in AEW now. He had that brief period late last year during that Punk feud where it felt like he was really about to break out and they were going to do something big with him, but, typical of Tony Khan's stop and start booking mentality. Whenever a guy's actually gaining momentum, they never know how to strike while the iron's hot. My guess is Kingston goes over and probably won't matter anyway because Jericho will be right back on TV the following week and Eddie will continue oscillating in mid-card purgatory. And if you think I'm wrong about that, just give it a month. Face of the Revolution ladder match. At this point, I perceive that to be the opener. Seems like it'd be the perfect car wreck spot fest opener for them. And while I'm still beyond baffled that there's not a single guy booked in this match under 220 pounds, it's just mostly big muscle guys who probably have no business being booked in ladder matches to begin with. There is actually like a general curiosity of seeing how the big guys actually work here, like especially Keith Lee. Right up until the point that they put the company mascot in there, I was cautiously optimistic for it. I'm sure Cassidy will kill my mood deader than a graveyard by the time I have to watch his retarded overdone shtick. My money's on Wardlow, although I wouldn't completely discredit Keith Lee from possibly winning. Everyone else is just kind of damage control. As of this current recording, there is still one more entrant to be announced, and that'll either be Christian Cage or Ethan Page, depending on who goes over on Rampage. My bet is it'll probably be Ethan Page, although I could have sworn they announced last week that Scorpio was getting the chance to qualify. Still, if Ethan wins, that's another guy well over the 230-pound mark in this ladder match, which is just very weird. Look, I really want to know how Tony came up with the concept for this. Like, did he really just go around his roster one day and find the biggest, beefiest dudes and say, I get a great idea. Let's stick these guys in a ladder match where the entire concept is to quickly climb up 10 to 15 feet in the air and grab a gimmick hanging above the ring. Like, how in the world could anything possibly go wrong with putting the biggest dudes I have under contract in that match? Guess we'll find out Sunday. Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa for the women's title is kind of up in the air for me now, considering the finish of that tag match on Dynamite. Rosa pinning Britt clean makes me think Britt's retaining now, but that could also be me reverting to WWE psychology and trying to apply that in this match when maybe they are just kind of running with the idea that Britt can't beat Thunder Rosa, and when Rosa actually beats Britt for the belt at the pay-per-view, it'll be the big story for the post-match celebration. The match I can purely hope will be better than the TV match. And, while I still wasn't a particular fan of their Lights Out match last year, it is still a match that people remember now. And Thunder Rosa's a good worker, Britt's good, so, I have enough confidence that they'll be able to pull out something watchable to moderately decent. But now comes the real debate over the Revolution show. The final two matches on the card. We got MJF versus CM Punk in the dog collar match. And we got Hangman Page and Adam Cole for the AEW World title. What should be the match that main events the show? Do you go with the match with the better built story and the better built angles and the better built characters, but is not for the World Championship? Or do you go with the mid-card world title program that hasn't been built up well at all, but it still involves a belt? For my money, I think Tony would be stupid not to main event MJF and Punk. Again, I have no faith in AEW's ability to make rational and comprehensible decisions, so if they do end up main eventing Page and Cole, I'll just roll my eyes at the whole thing. But let's say for the sake of argument that we operate under the booking strategy of them putting on Page versus Cole in the semi-main like it should. Generally, aside from all the criticisms I've already made about this title program, I'll just kind of leave it at this. I see no reason why they would have Hangman Page drop the strap now. I think they have a clear-cut idea of where they want to go with their world title program for later in the year. And if it does involve MJF being next in line to challenge after Revolution, I mean, Adam Cole winning here really makes no sense. It's a shame that Cole feels as irrelevant as he does in AEW, because if they had actually built up Adam Cole and didn't involve him with all the Orange Cassidy best friends garbage over the last few months, I would probably be sitting here right now making a valid case for Cole to win on Sunday. Once upon a time, Adam Cole was the top champion under another brand, and I mean, he was damn good under a former regime as the top world champion. It felt like a big deal. His matches were generally good. His promos were always on point. And even though the size thing was always going to be an issue, like, Adam Cole's strengths as a talent were able to outweigh those weaknesses. But everything about Cole in AEW, from his booking to his physique to his TV presence, it's been horribly botched. And I've talked about Hangman Page as the champion and how lifeless his title reign has felt outside the 2 matches with Danielson. I mean, really, whatever lightning in a bottle they had from that first encounter between Page and Danielson late last year, they've lost it. And I don't remember where I read this, but someone had mentioned how when they look at Adam Page right now as the champion, the only thing that they see is a guy that clearly looks like he doesn't want to be a top guy. And like, the more I watch Page on TV, the more I start to side with that opinion. You notice how less over Hangman Page and all the cowboy shit chants are now? All of Page's promos following that title win in November. I don't know, man. It feels like pandemic era Hangman Page all over again. It's low-key, sob story, underwhelming babyface Hangman Page, and well, now he just so happens to be the champion. It's one of those things where I think Tony Khan's persistence of putting the belt on Page has kind of backfired on him. And if MJF is the guy he drops the strap to, so be it. At this point, I think it's pretty apparent that Hangman Page is kind of flopped. It's just kind of the way I see it. It's not to say that his career's dead, because there's always a chance to rebuild somebody, but yeah, the whole vision of Hangman Page as AEW's top guy and their top world champion, yeah, that experiment, I think it's run its course at this point. But when it comes to MJF and Punk, pretty much the polar opposite of everything I just talked about with the world title feud, this feels like a big deal. It's been booked like a big deal, and it's probably the most anticipated blow-off for a match I've seen AEW ever do. I would be shocked if MJF doesn't win, unless somehow it all stems from Wardlow costing in the match or something, but even so, I think it's still too soon to do that. MJF is probably the hottest he's been in his entire career right now. I think he's the guy slated to win the world title this year, and if it's going to happen, he's got to go over here. I have no idea what to expect in terms of what they actually do in the match, other than a lot of blood and a lot of cursing. I'm sure it'll be great. Dare I even project it beforehand as AEW's match of the year? Of course, I don't want to jinx it by saying that. But I've loved everything about this program. Makes me wish they have the capacity as a company to do this kind of stuff with every program and every feud they book instead of only doing it once in a blue moon. Would make it so much easier to have faith and hope that this company will ever succeed. And again, not to sell this match short with the discussion, but I already kind of touched on most of it when I talked about their segment from the TV show. This feud has been fantastic, and I hope to God they make the right choice by having this main event, because I can safely say that nothing else on the show is going to follow this match as an overall package. Yeah, I'm sure you'll get the Meltzer cucks out there that try to pump up the beta bucks and say that'll be the best match of the night, and those people can go pound sand for all I care. But if they don't main event Punk and MJF on Sunday, I mean, again, I really can't get pissed about it because I've come to expect nothing less than stupid with AEW by now. But, I mean, it'll still leave a bitter taste in my mouth. So, that's my Revolution card projections. Seems like it'll be a pretty good show on paper. I don't think I'm as excited for this one going in as I was for the Full Gear show in November, but I'm really looking forward to that Punk MJF dog collar match. Everything else is kind of a wait-and-see prospect right now. Let's move on with the retro show here. NWA World Championship Wrestling from March 1st of the year 1986. Kicking things off with another airing of the Ronnie Garvin Knockout of Doom punch to Ric Flair. Of course, for those that don't remember, that had taken place following a 60-minute draw between the two. And even with Ronnie giving Flair the knockout punch, getting the visual pin, and not winning the world title, it still got a bigger reaction than Hangman Page actually winning the fucking world title late last year. Again, just a sole reminder of how great professional wrestling used to be back in the day. You know, when it actually drew money. What was not great was Ronnie's opening promo. Didn't start off too bad, what with him plugging his upcoming match later in the program with Arn Anderson for the TV title. And pretty soon he started venturing off into discussions about doing off-duty carpentry work and, well, he pretty much lost me at that point. I think his point was that when he beats Flair for the NWA World title, he will have to look himself in the mirror and realize that he got beaten by a freelance carpenter, which I think was supposed to get under Flair's skin, although he sure didn't sell it like it bothered him later in the program, so this failed. Up first for the show, in terms of matches, we had Jimmy Valiant versus Bob Owens. And actually, I decided to do a little fan interaction with this one. Pop quiz for anyone that's been following these shows or knows anything about Jimmy Valiant matches in 1986. Name the first move that Jimmy Valiant executed in this match. Was it A, the collar and elbow tie-up, B, the standing arm drag, C, a running clothesline, or D, an illegal thumb to the throat? If you answered anything other than D, you obviously haven't been paying any attention to Jimmy Valiant matches. By the way, I love how Pee Wee Anderson still has to give Valiant warnings for using illegal heel tactics in his matches. One would think that after watching more than, say, 2 Jimmy Valiant matches by now, the NWA officials would probably know that 99% of Jimmy's offense is illegal heel moves. Of course, our studio crowd was back in full swing for derogatory chants this week, as they were ardently cheering for Jimmy to break Owens' fingers when he had him tied up on the mat. Guess it's better than them chanting for guys to murder and kill each other, but still pretty brutal nonetheless. Jimmy, of course, going over with the elbow drop. Proceeding to then call out Paul Jones's army in the follow-up promo, I believe referring to them as Varen Bon Rashke and Tijo Gicho Khan. I love Jimmy Valiant. The kind of wacky, over-the-top cartooniness that certainly had a type of charm that you couldn't help but smile at every time you saw it. That was followed with the Rock and Roll Express coming out with their gimmicked rackets. Of course, I did not notice this last week, but yes, Ricky Morton's racket indeed had a double-sided print of the text head on, well, I guess what would be considered the head of the tennis racket. Although with pro wrestling, you never know where the innuendos stem from. And they did not say much other than promising to take out the Midnight Express, Jim Cornette, and, well, apparently Ric Flair for some reason. One would hope that is building to a TV match. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Flair and Morton have a match on the studio show toward the tail end of 85. Could have sworn I reviewed a Flair Morton match on this show already. Baron Von Raschke versus George South. I may be crazy, but is this not like the 4th or 5th week in a row we've seen a Baron Von Raschke match on this show? Not that I have anything against the Baron or anything, but, well, let's be blunt. He wasn't exactly tearing down the house with quality TV matches by this point in his career in 86. And this was certainly no different from every other Baron match I've reviewed on this show up to this point. It was hideously boring, it went forever, and Baron won with the claw. I have nothing else to note. That was followed with an Arn Anderson promo, which I did actually take copious amounts of notes for. He was there to basically whine, bitch, and moan about having to wrestle Ron Garvin later on, referring to Garvin as, and I quote, the Charles Manson of wrestling. The fuck is with the Charles Manson references in NWA during this time? Didn't most of his criminal actions take place in like the early 70s? Says that the only thing Garvin is a top contender for is being a prisoner and, of all things, a pervert. I laughed. I know these promos were very ad-libbed around this point in the business, but it's like, really, Arn? You were going through a glossary of terms in your head, and the first thing that came to your mind to refer to Garvin as here was a sexual deviant? Still a good promo, despite the odd references. That led into Ivan Koloff and Rocky King. I think I mentioned last week that Nikita Koloff in a dad polo was probably peak comedy for a Russian segment. I was gravely mistaken after seeing Nikita's attire for this show. The pull-over sweater. Now that was peak comedy. Aside from that, not a whole lot I wrote down about it, with the exception of the single studio fan that really wanted Rocky King to go over in this match. The match also went on for about 6 months, and actually started to make the Baron Von Raschke match feel shorter by comparison. I did laugh at the point in this match where Ivan whipped Rocky off the ropes and delivered an illegal chokehold to him, to which Tony Schiavone referred to as the Russian Hammer. Yes, an illegal chokehold in 1986 gets a special name from the Russians. Great heel move. We had Tully Blanchard and J.J. Dillon out for a promo, essentially to let us know that Tully promised to win the national heavyweight title in 4 weeks. And 5 weeks after that promo, he's still not the champion. Oh yeah, and remember when Blanchard Enterprises promised to beat up all of Dusty's friends so they could take out Dusty for good? Yeah, that plan failed too. But according to Tully and JJ, the match between him and Dusty is signed, sealed, and delivered for the coming week. So we will see if Tully can finally deliver on his promise to beat Dusty for the gold. Actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is the match with the infamous brass knuck shot from Tully. God, now I feel like I should recap that match in full. Because I remember the finish to that Dusty-Tully match where Tully captured the belt. And if I remember right, I think that was the match with the brass knuck finish. Probably should YouTube that one. With the Barbarian versus Tony Zane, which was slightly less entertaining than you'd probably imagine it would be. The highlight of the entire segment was actually Paul Jones, and if you can get over the blatant spot toward the end where Pee Wee Anderson is actively watching Paul Jones beat Zane with his cane and not calling for the disqualification, I actually got a kick out of Paul Jones in this segment. Apparently Tony Zane did something to set him off. Maybe he just didn't like looking at Tony's fat, out-of-shape, bruised body.
He's fat!
Yes, thank you, Scott. We had the Kolovs out at the booth for an interview, and I believe the crux of the material here was Tony Schiavone reminding us that they have not defended their six-man tag trophy in months because of Crusher Khrushchev's injury, to which Ivan retorts by basically letting everyone know that the Road Warriors have turned their attention from the Russians and are now directed at the Midnight Express and the World Tag titles. So much for that feud. We also had Nikita rambling here to Magnum TA in the ring. And, at one point, I would at least try to pick out a few key words from Nikita's nonsensical verbiage. At this point, unless he's actually saying the name Magnum TA, I have no clue what the fuck this guy's saying. I actually think he's become less coherent as time progresses on this show. And then Magnum killed Randy Mulkey in about the time it took for me to type that very sentence in my notes. Doesn't get paid by the hour, brother. Out next, with the World Champion Ric Flair, sporting the green and gold tonight as only Flair knows how. God, I'll tell you, man, it's one of those things where you look back and you really take a look at that custom big gold belt at this point. Think about all the different guys that have held some incarnation of that championship throughout the scope of history. It's so hard for me to picture anyone else other than Flair with that belt. The first guy I think of holding that championship, it's got to be Flair. Of course, a close second would probably be Hunter, but it's more so because of the fact that he ended up holding the fucking thing for like 4 straight years in WWE. But Flair was basically out there to put himself over and make sure David Crockett realizes who the real boss of the NWA is. And no, it's not Sasha Banks. Tully Blanchard versus Bill Tabb. So here's what I wrote down verbatim, and to be honest, I don't think there's a more accurate way to sum it up, so I'm just going to read exactly what I wrote down. Tabb gets brief moment of offense on Tully. Tully and JJ are plotting next course of action. Break for commercial. Back from break. Tully Blanchard has apparently won the match. What the fuck? And I was actually confused at first because when they first came back from the break and Tully hit the slingshot suplex, I had thought that he was immediately going for the pin. Then we come to find out it was a visual pin only because the actual finish had happened off camera. Strange choice of timing to go to commercial. Well, at least they gave us the satisfaction of seeing Tully hoist up the big guy for the suplex. That was then followed with Baby Doll and Dusty Rhodes doing a promo, where the only thing I noted about it was Dusty calling out the heckler by saying, "If you don't like what I have to say, you can go take your fat ass out of here." And if there was any hope at that point that Dusty was going to remain a babyface after this episode, that all immediately got flushed down the toilet. Not that the fans healing Dusty was a revolutionary concept around this point. I think it was pretty evident, even by this period, that the psychology of character dynamics was very out of whack. For Flair, it was like 80-20 split in terms of cheers over boos, and for Dusty, like, God, I think it'd be generous saying he was an even 50-50 split. So, yeah, that was the thing that happened on the show. We had Jim Cornette out for a Heat promo, claiming that Ricky Morton apparently had a gimmick concealed in his racket from last week, to which Tony Schiavone immediately reaches out to try and cop a feel of Corny's racket. And no, I do not mean for that to be taken inappropriately. He also let us know that he's still looking for an outing so that he doesn't have to get put in the shark cage. Then we had the Midnight Express taking on Paul Garner and some other guy we've never seen on the show before. This actually ended up being a moderately entertaining squash, what with the entire story of the match being Condrey and Eaton doing the extended beatdown on the job guys, but they would keep intentionally bringing the job guys over to tag in and out. I believe we had a line from Corny in this match where he informed us that he had been working closely with Richard Simmons to stay in shape, and it was only a matter of time before we would see him in the ring doing six-mans. And I assume he meant six-man tags, but with the Richard Simmons reference, let's just say you could take that any number of different ways. Cornette seems like the kind of guy back in the day that would be working out to sweat into the oldies. Following that, we get word that the 1986 Crockett Cup is in fact taking place in New Orleans, Louisiana. And when I tell you that David Crockett was devastated to have to announce that it would not be taking place in Charlotte due to the bidding war that was going on for venue location, I am not exaggerating there. I think David was on the verge of tears having to deliver the unfortunate news that they were unable to hold the tournament from Charlotte. But he was optimistic for next year. What a good heart that man has. That led to the Rock and Roll Express taking on Mike Somani and Bill Mulkey. And remember last time, I think I had mentioned that I had wrote down more than 2 sentences regarding a Rock and Roll tag match because, well, there was actually something of note to write down. Here's my one-liner for this week's Rock and Roll match. Double drop kick, 1, 2, 3. The finish was pretty great, I'll admit, as Gibson and Morton hit their patented double-team drop kick, and as they go for the cover, Mike Somani teases getting into the ring to break the count, and then he just waves his hand and says, fuck it, I'll take my paycheck and call it a night. Magnum TA did a promo, basically said he's ready to fight Nikita for the U.S. title. Yeah, it only took about 6 weeks, but I guess now Magnum is done talking and he's ready to get it on. And that took us to Arn Anderson defending his TV championship against Ron Garvin. And albeit, I really wasn't feeling the show all that much up to this point, so I was hoping this would at least lift the mood a little bit here. And thank God for Arn Anderson, because he always knows to come in handy when you need him to save the show. The first spot of the match is Arn trying to get Pee Wee Anderson to watch Ronnie's closed fist, because as we established earlier on, Arn has insinuated that Ronnie is a madman and a lunatic and that he cannot be trusted. So of course, what happens? Well, Arn throws a sucker punch to Ronnie first. Again, is it any wonder that everyone loved the heels on this show? Great stuff early on with Ronnie trying to work Arn on the mat. There was a really cool spot right before the break where Ron had Arn tied up on the mat in some kind of modified surfboard stretch, and while Arn was trying to fight for the ropes, Ronnie was giving him the straight chops to the chest area. And as we all know by now, Ronnie does not hold back with the chops. We had Flair out there at the booth to put Arn over as the match went along. And I love the finishing sequence here. Ronnie starts milking a comeback on Ron, and Arn keeps rolling out of the ring and ducking and dodging to try and run down the clock, and it ends up leading to Ronnie trapping Arn in the abdominal stretch, but the timekeeper rings the bell for the draw. Of course, that immediately leads to Flair trying to get involved so Arn can club Ronnie from behind, hit him with the gourd buster, and they both get out of dodge. And, of course, Crockett's sure to admonish the world champion before they cut away because he is fantastic. That led to Paul Jones coming out to call out Jimmy Valiant and basically declare war on him for 1986. And he did plug the Paul Jones Army by name here, so get ready for sheer cartoony comedy and one of the most infamous feuds of the 1986 period. I think the real question will end up being, is it as bad as I remember it being? Coming back from the booth, we had the Rock and Roll Express out once again. This time there to call bluff on Cornette for accusing them of loading their rackets with a gimmick. And while they're amidst this promo on Corny, out struts Ric Flair past the camera, just nonchalantly jabbing at Morton and Gibson while they're trying to do this promo, which was probably not a bad idea considering that Gibson tried to speak here. Keyword try. And I was wondering why Ric Flair wandered into the frame toward the end there. Well, we found out. Apparently Flair was booked to wrestle a match this week. And his opponent? Brody Chase. Brody must have bought Jim Crockett a coffee or something. Of course, Flair killed him in like 2 minutes, but damn it all if it wasn't an entertaining 2 minutes of television. Obviously, the best part of the entire match is Crockett continuing to admonish and call out Flair for all of his bullshit, saying Flair has the audacity to think he's bigger than the world championship and his ego's out of control. And looking back at the exchanges with Crockett and Flair on this show, you'd have thought during 1986 that they were actually building to those two facing off for the world title at Starrcade. And the finish is Flair letting us know that it's time to go to school. So he struts his stuff, he locks in the figure four, gets the submission win, and it was immediately to the booth where Flair got in David's face to rub it in. Fucking epic. And that was pretty much the show. Oh yeah, and Cornette came back out for a 30-second promo. I don't know what he said. It wasn't important. Something about not getting locked in the cage, which he already let us know earlier on the show, so I'm not sure why he needed to come out to say it again, but whatever. Gotta fill time somehow. Yeah, not really a good show in hindsight. The TV title match with Arn and Ronnie Garvin was great. Flair being Flair is always great. But beyond that, this was another one of those shows with a bunch of lifeless squashes and moderately good but no blow-away promos. Like I mentioned before, they're not always going to be knock it out of the park quality shows, so I'll take this one on the chin this week and just hope for a better one next time. Certainly not like AEW shows where I basically take it on the chin every week and I'm left with a massive headache after the show's over. And that'll bring us to World Class Championship Wrestling from March 5th, 1983. A pretty stacked card for the show this week. And looking back at the actual matches for the show, I don't think I would say that any of them were what I would consider the actual highlights of the show. Although I did get some mild entertainment out of the finish of that Toriyatsu Mudrill match. But we begin with Bill Mercer doing a sit-down with Devastation Incorporated's, I guess you'd say, head of operations, General Skandor Ogbar. And this is great. It starts with Mercer asking about the Great Kabuki's road to recovery following the phantom injury angle that we never saw, to which they play a video package of Kabuki in training. And they've got the Japanese music in the background. Kabuki's going through, as Ogbar apparently puts it, ritual. Kabuki standing on a bridge with his katana sword, and Mercer is acknowledging the fact that he has seen Kabuki in the all-impressive samurai garb before. By far, the best part of the video is the still image of Kabuki sitting cross-legged in deep meditation while they filter in the images of the Dragon Demon mask. And Ogbar informs us that Kabuki has mastered the ability to, and I quote, maintain a tranquil mind. And of course, that would have been an awesome segment in and of itself. But then they cut to the pre-tape of Kamala, who was soon to make his debut on the program. And the first thing I wrote down upon seeing Kamala in the year 1983, it is hard to actually remember a period where we did not see Kamala with the full white face paint. And here he is in this video. We actually see Kamala's face. Well, more of it than usual. And the best part of the video, aside from Kamala running through fields with a giant fucking spear and the jungle music playing in the background, is the dubbed over audio where we are informed of the following information in roughly similar order. Kamala, 6'9", 385 pounds. Kamala, the most dangerous man in wrestling today. Kill Mala. And yes, he actually said that. Arms and legs as large as trees. Kamala, stronger than many of the world's most dangerous animals. Kamala, 6'9", 385 pounds. You know, just in case you missed the first time around that he was 6'9", 385 pounds. This was so wacky, but goddamn it was it fun. And I can also confidently say that when it was over, I knew more information about the Great Kabuki and Kamala in world-class championship wrestling than I do about virtually 90% of AEW's roster. It's almost like they actually knew how to get guys over effectively back in the day. And that led us into our first match for the program, the Magic Dragon versus Iceman King Parsons. And I wrote almost virtually nothing down here, aside from the fact that I almost fell asleep twice watching Parsons apply multiple rest holds on the Magic Dragon in this 2-minute match. Parsons also ended up winning with the rear view, which is still singly the best worst finishing move of all time. And just to let us know that Parsons was actually using this move as a legit finisher in 1983, he also gave the move to Hussein to knock him out of the ring, and that was a very interesting bump that Hussein took. Up next, we had the Great Toriyatsu facing Al Mudrill. Toriyatsu, not to be confused with Yoshitatsu of WWE fame. Now, Yoshitatsu was at least a moderately good wrestler. So we'll get to the highlight of the match in a minute, but I also had to write this down. I believe I noted a couple weeks back on the NWA studio show that Tijo Khan had the worst chops I think I've ever seen on a syndicated televised wrestling program. I think I'm wrong. There was a spot in this match where Toriyatsu delivered karate chops to the back of Mudrill's neck on the apron. I think I've seen 4-year-old boys having more convincing tussles on a playground than what amounted to these fake-as-fuck weak-looking chops. There was also a spot where Yatsu gave Mudrill a body slam and almost tripped over his own feet after the delivery. That was grand. I think the Great Khali had more balance than this guy did. Now I know where the metaphor working with 2 left feet comes from. And then we got the finish. And this match had, I think, what was simultaneously the wackiest, the worst, and the best finish I've seen all wrapped up into one ball. Get this. The finish is Al Mudrill taking an Irish whip into the corner, slipping off the middle turnbuckle, attempting a crossbody leap onto Yatsu. And as Mudrill is laying flat on his back, Yatsu proceeds to do the most overly exaggerated wind-up you've ever seen in order to execute a stomach claw submission. And the funniest part of the whole thing, Yatsu won clean with this move. And I rewound the wind-up several times because I had to make sure that I didn't inaccurately envision what I saw on camera. What I saw the first time was exactly the same thing I saw the second and the third time I rewatched it. And it was glorious every time. Yatsu rears back. He flails his wrist and fingers up in the air like a wild man. He lets out a big snarling growl. He does a full stomach first bump onto the mat so that he can grab Mudrill's midsection to apply the most ludicrous looking claw hold I think you would ever see. A claw hold to the gut that would probably leave me laughing uproariously because I'm extremely ticklish. Props to Mudrill, though, for making it look convincing. Thumbs down for actually submitting to this ridiculous hold. Someone's got to gift that into a clip, though. It's one of those images that you never unsee once you see it the first time. But then we get by far the real highlight of the show. A segment straight out of Smoky Mountain Wrestling circa 1992 or 1993. Well, instead of Brian Lee and Sonny, it's Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine sitting poolside while Mercer conducts an interview. Or, actually, I think it may have been a jacuzzi. Not really sure. Anyway, as we established last week, Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin's gimmick is that he refuses to have his matches filmed. And we come to find out that the reason for this is that he does not want people to see his imperfections in the ring, even though, as Garvin stated himself, there are no imperfections or flaws in his wrestling. Probably the best part of the whole thing is Jimmy Garvin explaining that things in the world are becoming more difficult and more expensive, and in order to take initiative, you can't be laying down on the job. And if there's one thing we know about Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, he doesn't lie down on the job. All the while, here's Jimmy Garvin sitting in a jacuzzi in his goddamn underwear. What a fucking heel. And of course, it all leads to the part where Sunshine hands Jimmy some photos of the Von Erichs and the Freebirds so that he can admonish them, call them pathetic and worthless scum, rip their pictures up, and proclaim that he's here to bring class to world-class championship wrestling. And upon conclusion, I immediately declare that Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin is my new favorite wrestler of all time. And anyone that tries to assert that there's a better wrestler than Jimmy Garvin will be immediately canceled and banished from this channel. This is not up for debate this time. We had David Von Erich versus Buddy Roberts. Additionally, with all members of the Freebirds and the Von Erichs coming out for an altercation, and we are informed before the opening bell that the match is not permitted to begin until all parties disband from ringside and go to the back. Well, all parties except for Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine, apparently, who remained ringside to film the match. And Bronco Lubitsch was fine with this for some reason. And I have to admit, this was nowhere near as good or memorable as the six-man from last week. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say it was extremely boring and underwhelming. Also, probably didn't help that I was interrupted during this match from someone trying to get me to sign names onto a Republican ballot for upcoming Pennsylvania midterm elections. Anyway, I'll just skip to the finish. So Hayes and Gordy run out for the DQ finish, and they do the Heat beatdown, only to get run off by the rest of the Von Erichs. And actually, a crucial element to this afterbirth was Gordy hitting David with the swinging neckbreaker, which David sold in the interview with Mercer up next. Yes, a swinging neckbreaker being used as an injury angle. Imagine that. And I didn't write much down about the David interview. Really wasn't a whole lot to it. Just promising and vowing revenge on the Freebirds, which, at this point in 1983, probably left most people wanting more, but by the following year, not so much, when they were essentially vowing the same thing. This is a moderately entertaining show, though. The pre-tapes and interviews are fucking awesome this week, especially that Jimmy Garvin interview. That was some classic heel pro wrestling right there. And, like I said, even though we know the history with the Freebirds and the Von Erich program and the fact that it was beaten to death over the course of this year, this is still a hot feud, particularly by this point in 83. And I believe next week they announced the big showdown between Kerry and Michael Hayes in singles competition, which should be great. And I'll say this too, these shows fly by really fast in that 45-minute period. I know the WCW shows can kind of start to drag, especially when things are pretty formulaic with the interview, squash match, lather, rinse, repeat booking. But these world-class shows are always different. They're always finding ways to spice things up with promos and pre-tapes, and they got some fresh talent acquisitions coming in to heat up the upper card. And it's getting me excited to see where things go for the following weeks. So, yeah, good show. And as we wrap things up for this week, again, please comment, rate, and subscribe. We really appreciate your support here on YouTube, especially as we try to grow the FSWR channel. Again, we'll be back for Monday, which should be a packed show. We'll be diving into our usual Rampage and Power rundown, and then we'll cap off with the Revolution recap at the end. I will probably keep the Rampage on the shorter side in terms of running that down, especially if there's stuff that ties into the pay-per-view that'll end up being inconsequential to report on by Monday. But it'll still be a decently lengthy show. So definitely stop back and check out the Monday podcast. I'm sure there'll be plenty to rant about with that Revolution pay-per-view, so I'll be sure to prep some good material out ahead of time. Until then, have a good weekend. Enjoy the pay-per-view if you plan on watching it. And see you Monday. Take care. Peace.